COVID. I hope you're all staying safe and physically distanced and socially connected. We are recording this meeting. It will be videotaped by Missoula Community Access Television as part of MCAT's Media Assistance Grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves the Missoula area on cable channels 189 and 190. You can also find videos of past City Club Missoula forums by clicking the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. City Club Missoula's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire them on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We are committed to doing this in a way that fosters civil discourse and mutual respect, where civically engaged people of goodwill, like all of you, can gather, learn from each other, and discuss issues with each other, often from very different perspectives. You see our sponsors listed on the slide. Without our continued support from our sponsors, City Club would be unable to provide this vital platform for civil discourse. We are especially grateful to our executive level sponsors, Blackfoot, First Security Bank, and the University of Montana. Grateful to them all for staying with us. There are too many to list, but in addition to our executive level sponsors, I just want to call out a few. At the ambassador level, the Missoula Downtown Association. At the community level, Northwestern Energy. At the leader level, Garlington Lawn and Robinson. Supporter, Farmers State Bank. And a nonprofit sponsor, Montana Public Radio. We would also extend a special thank you to Denise May, the lead sign language interpreter at the University of Montana's Disability Services Department, for being with us today and making our forum more accessible. I invite all of you to become members or sponsors to support civil discourse around community issues. Again, I say this every month. We don't know how much longer we'll be meeting via Zoom. It has the advantage of making our forums more accessible and diversifying our audience, but the disadvantage of not getting us all in the same room together. I also want to thank our terrific behind-the-scenes IT administrator from the University of Montana, Alex Carklins, for guiding us through every step of our remote forum process. We couldn't do this without Alex and the UM. And of course, thank you to our board and our administrator, Eric Leggold. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some good news. And I think our forum committee was too, because they selected this topic of innovation in the time of COVID out of a wish to focus more on the silver lining, any shred of silver lining in the pandemic. So thank you to our three panelists, whom our moderator will introduce in a minute. And I want to thank that moderator, Grant here. Grant is the president and CEO of Missoula Economic Partnership. Prior to his MEP position, Grant served as CEO of Five Valleys Land Trust here in Missoula for a decade, establishing it as one of the most respected and successful conservation organizations in the state and one of the most successful land trusts in the country. His work in conservation helped families expand their businesses and help communities around Missoula County tap into the growing recreation and tourism economy that we know is so central to our well-being as a community. Grant also served on the MEP board, including as treasurer. He has a deep and broad understanding of economic development, which is saying a lot for someone who actually has a master's degree in geology. Most important, he is one of my principal pandemic partners who make the COVID-19 pandemic just a little bit more bearable here in the new abnormal. So, Grant, take it away. I will come back and talk to you at break about our Q&A format. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. So just one important note, out of respect and appreciation for the translation going on today for sign language, we will probably have a brief pause from one segment to the next to allow the translation to catch up. On behalf of the Missoula Economic Partnership, board and staff, I'm so pleased to be invited to participate in City Club today. When COVID struck Missoula and the world around us, MEP had the privilege of seeing for-profit businesses, non-profit businesses, governments, and individuals respond to COVID in inspiring and uplifting ways that made me proud to be a part of this community. I'm honored to help facilitate a conversation amongst a few people who represent the wisdom, courage, creativity, innovation, and resilience that define our community. I also want to note that by shining a light on and perhaps even celebrating some of the good work happening in response to COVID, none of us intends to suggest that the challenges are behind us. We are likely much closer to the beginning of this pandemic than the end. And our hope at MEP, and I'm sure for City Club, is that some of what we hear today will help many of us get through the challenges that still lay ahead. With that, I am delighted to introduce our guests, Kia Lizak, Dr. Kyle Volk, and Ben Morris. Kia Lizak has served as the Executive Director of Zootown Arts Community Center for nearly 9 years. Kia spearheaded and led the visionary process and multi-million-dollar campaign efforts to bring the ZAC downtown, tripling their size and their ability to build community through accessible arts experiences. Kia was recognized by the Missoula Downtown Association in 2019 as the Downtowner of the Year. Kia has served as a volunteer in many committees, including the Missoula Public Art Committee and Missoula's Community Arts Team, to implement the Kennedy Center support for the Spark Arts program. She is passionate about empowering people of all ages through the arts and creative community building. Dr. Kyle Volk is a history professor at the University of Montana, where he teaches courses in United States political and legal history. He is also chair of the history department and oversees the department's 14 faculty members and its undergraduate and graduate programs. He has been at UM since 2007. Ben Morris is CEO and founder of Coaster Cycles. Ben started Coaster Cycles with a small loan, 5 bikes, and a ride to Boston's Fenway Park. But he knew then that the 3 wheels of a pedicab could go further than most expected. Ben's sharp eye for marketing opportunities and creative ways to build brand awareness enabled him to grow his small business with savvy. In 2009, he founded the company's media division, Coaster Outdoor, a full-service media company that offers unique advertising and promotional platforms. Now with the breadth of operational and financial experience in the transportation industry and a national network and manufacturing facility, Ben and his team are poised to be leaders in eco-friendly mobility products that provide transportation, delivery, and branding services for a range of clients, including Fortune 500s, governments, universities, event promoters, and retailers. So I'm hoping that each of you could take a second and maybe, Ben, we'll start with you. And just for the folks joining us today who don't know a lot about your team and your work, could you please share a little bit about what business as usual looked like for you before COVID-19?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and Susan for having me. And I will be brief. A minute introduction, so I'll try to keep it very high level of what Coaster Cycles is and what we normally do in sort of our day-to-day enterprise. So basically, for those of you who don't know, Coaster Cycles provide electric pedal-powered mobility solutions for the last mile. And we do that through a vertically integrated platform. Where we operate the bikes in some markets, we own the advertising rights to those bikes, and we manufacture the vehicles under the Coaster brand, and manufacturing happens takes place there. So our ability to operate the bike lane is a little bit unique. It helps companies lower carbon footprint, helps operational efficiencies, and ultimately helps companies lower delivery costs for their customers. We do this for a variety of different industries, mostly B2B focused, what sort of our core area of expertise is. We work with last mile delivery companies, we work with micro-mobility companies, we work with universities, including the University of Montana, food and beverage, government universities alike. The majority of our team is actually based in Bonnet, Sawmill, where we do much more design, engineering, testing, and building. And so, it's a very brief, high-level overview of what we do in our normal day-to-day.
Thanks, Ben. Kia, could you talk a little bit about your work at the ZAC?
Yeah. So at the ZAC, in typical pre-COVID times, we have a three-story building in downtown Missoula where we have multiple classes, education for youth and adults on a daily basis, a walk-in paint-your-own pottery studio and artist shop, three galleries where we had First Friday openings, sometimes up to 1,000 people coming in each First Friday, a performance space called an event center where we had shows almost every single night. We even held the documentary film festival this year. Here we had plays, music shows, and also multiple rentals for parties in our large event space. It's a 400 capacity event space. We have artist studios here. So we have different artists that rent out studios. We have rental spaces for conferences. We had several conferences here prior to the pandemic. And we have a public print shop where people can come in and use our printmaking equipment. And an interactive youth play area, and also a community music school.
An incredible resource for the community. Thanks, Kia. Kyle, could you share a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. And thanks to you, Brent, and thank you, Susan, for involving me. As Brent said, I'm the chair of the history department at UM. We're a core academic unit at the university. We've been around for over 100 years. We're not going anywhere. We educate the masses in true form. We probably have over 1,000 students that come in and out of our classrooms every year. We have several hundred majors and minors. We have an MA program and a PhD program. We graduate about 1 to 2 doctoral students each year, about 3 to 5 master's students each year, and probably about 50 undergraduate BA students each year. Under normal circumstances, I would say 95% of our courses are taught in person, face to face. We pride ourselves on close mentorship of students and involving students in the process of original research and giving them the opportunity to present that research on campus and at conferences around the Pacific Northwest. Things changed a little bit last year, but I suspect we'll get into that in a little bit.
Thanks, Kyle. So we all shared this, I would argue, a profound experience, which was the COVID shutdown. It was this moment of, I think, profound realization for all of us, the scale and scope of the impact that we were going to experience. And I think for many of us, we were led to believe when this shutdown started that if we shut down and we got through this for 2 or 3 weeks, we might see some return to the new normal. I think as that shutdown evolved, many people realized that the scale was going to have a profound impact on them. I'm wondering if each of you could maybe talk a little bit about when you realized that this impact was going to be much greater than just a few weeks shutdown for you, and how you started to see innovation as a way to address what you were going to see as those changes. Maybe Kia, would you be willing to start a little conversation about that?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Obviously, I was almost kind of laughing to myself as I was talking about all the things that we do in normal times, because if every single thing we do involves people coming together under one roof. And so the idea of not being able to do that really felt at first like this is it, and yes, I think one of the challenging things about everything the whole way, and particularly in the beginning, was just the changing sort of atmosphere from week to week and trying to make decisions about going forward. And here at the ZAC, we have we're always planning for the next month or the next 2 months or the next 3 months out. And so really after that first shutdown, let's see, we ended up shutting our doors a little bit before we were the mandatory shutdown, based on our own sort of decisions and following what was happening and going to sort of a curbside pickup. And then as we came back from the first shutdown, we were, embarking on our major summer camp season, which is 10 weeks of summer camps, over almost 30 summer camps, and just trying to think about how we were going to do that. And there was definitely sort of this limbo week to week, following the news and trying to figure out, can we do this? Should we not do this? Navigating through the emotions of staff, the emotions of the board, the emotions of parents and the public. And so, I mean, for us and for me, ultimately, it was like, well, we need to just, we need to make a decision and decide what we're going to do. And then it was just navigating through all the information, just all the information about what's safe, what are the best practices, and really trying to build kind of our own version of what we felt was the safest way to go forward. And that was kind of the beginning of, so I guess I would add to that we, as I stated before at the ZAC, we do so many things, and we decided, obviously the very first thing that we knew we would have to shut down and probably not reopen for a long time was having music shows and plays and that type of interactive experience. And so really sort of focusing in on, okay, if we're gonna do summer camps, we're gonna do this one thing, and we're gonna do it really well, and we're gonna do it really safe, and involving kind of all of the staff in a concentrated effort on doing one or two things instead of doing 500 different things, was one of the first steps that we took to sort of trying to continue going forward.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thanks, Kia. Ben, could you talk a little bit about sort of that moment for you and sort of what that realization looked like and what it meant for you in terms of what you needed to do next?
Yeah, it was, so it's interesting. One of the realizations for us actually came from a company that's been very prominent and in the news recently. That's TikTok. And so TikTok was who gave us our COVID revolution. We sort of entered early on, like we're very event focused and driven. And so in our media portion of our business, we do a lot of work around different music festivals, and TikTok was planning a very large activation with us at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas in mid-March. And in mid-February, they began having conversations with us about what it looks like to cancel or change that contract prior to any events really canceling at that stage. And naturally, TikTok being a headquartered in China, they saw sort of what was happening in China at the time and the impact it had on, just the community and society there. And so they obviously were pretty active and pretty out front in terms of what was going to happen. And so internally as a team, as they ultimately canceled out of South by Southwest, we were starting to say, like, oh boy, like what does this mean? And what happens with all these additional events and venues and things that we had lined up coming up next. And, as a company, we were trying to think very much in, I would say, 4-week increments is usually the way I sort of rationalized and thought about everything was, what does it look like? Are we back online in 4 weeks? And I think what became very early on and very clear was like 4 weeks was not going to be realistic. And I think what was mentioned earlier, like in some portions of our business, we've already said, like, we're hoping we get back online in spring of 2021. And we don't even know what that'll look like. And so this notion of 4 weeks has turned into what does 2021 look like? And so that was a really trying and scary times, just something we never faced before, and trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do with these events? What are we going to do with these contracts? What are we going to do with these financial obligations that we have already? What are our customers going to do that are buying bikes from us, and how are we going to adapt to what they need? Are they going to put everything on pause? And then what does that happen ultimately to, our suppliers, and then most importantly, the people that, that work for us, and how's that going to impact them and their jobs? And so, Justin, who's my partner and COO, who probably many of you have met, is based there. I'm based in the Bay Area too. So, like, even the Bay Area, we saw had a very different approach to, like, what was going on pretty early on, and shutting everything, down really early on, and pulling kids out of school. And so it was a confusing time. It was a scary time, and it was a time that we just, had to be honest with ourselves and with the people working with us in terms of, like, what was going to be the best positive steps forward for all of us.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
Sure.
Kyle?
Sure. Obviously, the challenges facing the university are famous, infamous, notorious, legion. You can read about them in the Missoulian or any other newspaper every day, because they're facing UM and every other institution of higher learning around the country. Thinking back to late March and early April, and trying to figure out how we were going to finish the semester, and talking with all of my colleagues, some of whom are technologically savvy and others who are not. I mean, the challenges just abounded. But let me bring it down a level and just talk more on the level of the history department, rather than rehearse the general challenges of the university. I met with students a week maybe into the lockdown via Zoom, and I meet with students regularly, kind of a leadership team of undergraduates, just to check in with them and see how things are going, see what challenges they're facing, what kind of ideas they have, so on and so forth. And one of the things that they pointed out to me is that their summer work opportunities and their summer internships had quickly evaporated, that what they had planned to do in May and June and July just weren't going to be there. They had no opportunities they didn't think, to find work that was remunerative, or any internships where they were going to get any training for anything that they might want to be doing after they graduate. And this is something that obviously concerns us mightily in the history department and throughout the university, setting our students up for success once they graduate. So over the past year, the history department has been working on what we're calling a public history program, which is a subset of our program, and it's to train students in the subfield of history that's known as public history, which is basically history done anywhere outside of the academy. So archives and records management, museums and exhibitions, interpretive planning, documentary film, podcasting, these sorts of things. So we're starting to integrate this more into our curriculum. I've done some fundraising around this program. We've put some new courses together in the past year. We offered for the first time ever a History of Missoula course, so a course focused on local history. We did that last year. It's a huge success. And we also, in this program, started expanding our internship program to get students out into the field, interning at places like Fort Missoula or the Montana Historical Society, or anywhere else that might be related to the skills that they possess, strong reading, writing, critical thinking skills. Anyway, these internships started to dry up, and I said, we in the history department should kind of create our own internship program this summer around COVID-19. So we put together an internship program really to give students something to do, and also to help them develop the skills that they were going to lose out on because their internships have been canceled. So we set up an oral history internship, and we trained students in the practice of oral interviews, training them to be interviewers and to go out and interview people in Western Montana about their experiences living during the pandemic. So we had 5 or 6 students who did this. They went out, they interviewed all sorts of people, from the director of the Poverello Center to the owners of Runner's Edge, to an environmental studies professor at to a Black Lives Matter protester, so on and so on. There were over 20 interviews that students conducted. They transcribed the interviews, and the interviews are going to be housed in the library at in the Mansfield archives there, so researchers in the future can have access to them. And this is the kind of thing that we did, and I think it worked out really well. It was completely driven by, that meeting I had with those students when they were said, we have nothing to do this summer, and we're concerned that we're not going to have any prospects down the road.
Great. And congratulations on that, Kyle. It's an impressive accomplishment. Ben, you and Kia nicely sort of articulated sort of that, what so many of us experienced, which is this series of questions and the level of uncertainty around what you were doing and where it was going. But at Coaster Cycles, you guys really were able to retool and say, we see something we can do right now directly in response to COVID. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll give you the abridged version of it, but basically the same week that everything shut down here in the Bay Area, my kids were at school, out now home. We basically had hit the point, and Justin and I have been talking about this every single day, at which point we were going to have to scale back as a team and furlough or either lay people off. And we haven't done that in 15 years. So it was foreign to us, and it was scary to us. And we went through layoffs and furloughs. I call them sort of a mix of both. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week in mid-March. And it was just, mentally it was very difficult, and there were hard conversations to have, especially when some of these have to happen, over the phone or over video and not in person. And by Friday afternoon, after kind of a long week, I just happened to be looking on LinkedIn, and I saw an open source face shield design from an engineer that worked on our pedicab design, and out of the University of Madison. And so I kind of, at that moment, I kind of reached out to Justin. I was like, Justin, this was a point where PPE was in dire demand, right? New York City was really raging, and they're like, we can't get PPE. And, and I was like, look, if healthcare workers can't have the proper gear to wear to help, patients, then how are we going to get through this? And at the same time, we just had these layoffs. And so when I looked at this design and said, okay, there's plastic in this, there's foam in this, there's elastic and staples, and plastic and foam we already use in our bike designs. And so kind of jumped on it really quickly and said, all right, we think we can do this. And I reached out to Providence, was the first group that I reached out to on LinkedIn, and heard back from them right away, and spent all weekend and the next week trying to figure out how we could build this. Got them some samples, and they said, that looks great, we'll take 500,000 of them. And we were like, okay, all right. At this point, we haven't actually built any face shield in a production scale. So we kind of put pricing together of what we thought seemed adequate, but we had 10 samples that we had put together. So we hadn't bought any of the material in volume and actually assembled any of this. So there was a lot of concern around how you work in a safe environment where people are socially distanced, and what are cleaning protocols, and learning about hospital rules and guidelines and compliance with a lot of that. And so we just kind of we just figured it out, really. And it took a couple of weeks, and it was pretty difficult, and it just sort of spawned from there with a couple other groups who wanted the face shields, and it kind of became a bigger local community effort within Missoula. But it was somewhat by accident that we just came across that, and it was honestly a blessing in disguise, because it helped us, tremendously. It continues to do that by the people who we serve with the actual PPE, and then the jobs and the people we've had to bring back on, and they can go and actually make the face shields with us.
Yeah, it was at MEP, as an organization that's worked closely with your group for a while and seen your success and growth. It was just really jarring and startling to start to see those job losses, and so inspiring to see you guys be able to pivot so quickly and bring your teams back together, and it's just really extraordinary.
Thank you. And I will say this, I'm sorry, I'll say really quickly, the work with MEP, the work at, First Security Bank and like the governor's office and Missoula Job Service. And like, we just have tremendous support in like the local community and the Missoula community on the state level as well. And it makes me so proud to like call that home for us for business. Because without the local support that we received there, I don't think we would have been as successful as we have been. So thank you, and thank you everyone else.
Yeah, Kia, you talked about most of your business model being based on people coming together. I guess I would argue that most of Missoula's quality of life is based on people coming together, and I think it really defines who we are as a community. And maybe few things define us as much, and equal to the outdoors as the sort of arts and culture. And you play such an instrumental role in that world, and also with taking care of our kids at a time when so many of us are sort of hungry for ways for people to come together and ways for our kids to be engaged. Could you sort of talk about some of your successes in adapting to COVID and sort of what things look like for the ZAC this summer and where you're at?
Yeah, and first of all, I'll back up a little bit too, because now it's been such a sort of month by month, and even in response to your last question, I remember that actually the first hurdle we had to overcome, and for all the other nonprofit people who may be watching, was the fundraiser hurdle. So we actually had our biggest fundraiser of the year was scheduled for March 28th, which is an art auction that takes place at the Wilma. 200 people seated, which is actually, we always push the capacity to 230 people or something, and just have people packed in there. And it's a sit-down event, dinner, auction, and that was just scheduled right then and there, right? So, we literally went from one meeting where a board member said, hey, at risk of everybody laughing at me, like, I just want to kind of bring up, like, what if we have a global pandemic? And we're all hoping for the best, whatever. This is like a month before, right? And then week by week, as we got closer and closer, it was like, well, what are we going to do? And can we have it? And at this point for us, a lot of people, all the nonprofits, I think, are coming across this one by one to this place where, what are we going to do about our fundraiser? And for us, it was just so close to the actual time. We had already sold tickets. We had already sold sponsorships. We had already sold, we had already had the whole event planned. We already had all of the art. We had already had the opening for the art at the ZAC, and had it all on the walls and everything. So it was a matter of like, do we postpone or do we try to move this online? And ultimately, and what we had seen is a lot of people postponing things. Okay, we'll do it in the fall. We'll do it in the fall. We'll do it in the fall. And we were like, oh my gosh, even if we were able to do it in the fall, how many things are going to be happening in the fall? Like, there's going to be 900 things on every Saturday in September if we're really going to get through this. So we just were like, let's figure out how to do this online, and that was really scary. It was like, oh my gosh, an art auction, it's all based on people being in the room, drinking, bidding each other up, being present. And we're really dependent upon this fundraiser to be able to function. And especially going into an unknown period, we're going into an abyss of like, we may be looking at financial bankruptcy, and we can't live without this fundraiser. So we just brought every person on deck, all of our staff, again, just everyone had their little departments. Well, now suddenly everyone's department is making this fundraiser a success. We're working together. So we researched online platforms. We moved every single piece of art to an online auction platform. And we really tried to take advantage of the good things about that, right? Well, now we can reach the person who maybe used to live in Missoula and loved the ZAC, 8 years ago, but now they live in California, or, but we're also looking at like, oh gosh, is this insulting to people when we're looking at everyone's laid off, losing their jobs, like not having money, and then we're asking people for money, right? And I think that was another big thing that all of the nonprofit world was struggling with. Like, is this okay? And so ultimately, we did move it to an online platform. And it took a lot of everyone coming together and getting, I mean, I think we had 90 auction items or something, and we had like a weekend to do this, you know, and get the word out that it was going to be this new thing. And we had already had all these sponsors, and it was all about showcasing their support for the arts at our event. So we moved that to an online platform as well, so we could honor all of our sponsors, doing a lot of social media for our sponsors. And we did the whole auction on Zoom. I narrated it from my house. We also went from this one, like a week before, we thought we were going to be able to do it in the ZAC, and we were all going to dress up, and we were all going to have, you know, showcase the art and do this kind of like thing that was sort of live. And then everything got shut down. It was like we couldn't even be together, 5 people at the ZAC. We had to all be at home. So I narrated it from my house, and we did a Zoom. We would go to other people's houses, and we had people prepared to like play songs and do some entertainment, like many kids that had been here. And we showcased all the auction pieces from our homes. We Zoomed into different staff people's houses, and they showcased the pieces. And we kind of tried to do this big live event. And we actually had, I think it was about 200 people tune in, and we ended up pulling it off. We ended up making what we needed to off of the auction, which set us up to be able to keep operating for the next couple of months. So that was, and I know I've been talking for a long time about that one thing, but that was number 1 innovation. I can let somebody else talk now and get back to number 2 and 3 and 4 maybe in a minute, but.
No, that's great. Having managed many an auction and benefit for nonprofits for many years, I appreciate just what an undertaking that is, and probably comparable to most restaurants having to go to a takeout order only when they're so used to serving dining in. It's really a big transition. So kudos to you for pulling that off in such a short time frame. And maybe there's a whole community of nonprofits that would like to borrow your recipe book throughout Missoula. Kyle, I'm wondering if, maybe historians and innovators are not always known as being the exact same things, but clearly you guys were able to pivot quickly. Could you talk a little bit about just sort of the leadership that you try to have within the department as department chair, and how sort of leadership and your thoughts about it sort of allowed you guys to move so quickly to make the kinds of changes to standard programs that let you be successful in a short time?
Yeah, certainly. You know, it's funny that you say that history and innovation might, you know, be opposites, but I actually think I've been thinking about that a lot, especially as I was considering what I might talk about in this forum. And I think history in the university is all about innovation, right? That's the nature of the university. On the one hand, we're like custodians of knowledge, and then on the other hand, we're creators of knowledge. That's what we do for a living. All of my colleagues and students are always creating new knowledge through research, right? And writing and those sorts of projects. But as a leader, what you're asking in this moment, I don't know. I mean, I was just trying to listen to the students to see what their needs were. And I was also in this moment trying to listen to my faculty to see what ideas they had and to see what they had to offer our students in the community. I mean, another thing that we did, which I think was very successful, in April, we immediately put a new course on the books for students to take, and we ran it during summer session, and we're going to run it again in the fall. And the course is called COVID-19 and History, Disease and Disaster in Perspective. So if you're interested in thinking about, you know, the present moment that we're living in the pandemic and its relationship to the AIDS crisis of the 80s and 90s, or the 1918 pandemic that we've heard so much about, or cholera in the 19th century, or smallpox during the American Revolutionary War, this is a course for you. But this is something we could do because I talked with one of our faculty members, Leif Fredrickson. He's an environmental historian and a historian of public health, really excellent scholar. And I said, would this be something you'd be interested in doing? And he said, absolutely, let's do it. So we put it together, and we got some funding for the course from the administration, which has been very supportive of all of our efforts. And, you know, there you have it. But I guess circling back, listening and seeing what resources you have, and then spinning them out in new ways, given this crazy situation we find ourselves in.
Thanks, Kyle. Ben, it seems like you're, as I've learned more about your company over the years, it really seems like it's always been one about innovation, of constantly refining products and new product lines. How much of the sort of spirit of that approach impacted your sort of whole team's ability to pivot in the face of COVID?
Yeah, I would say Justin, over the years, have been pretty good at innovating new ideas. Some would make the case probably too much that actually hurts our business model because we're doing too many different things. And frankly, that's been, I would say, one of the key takeaways, from us through all this is like, we were doing a lot of things good, but nothing great. And the face shield was something that, we were able to innovate and we were able to just retool. And frankly, a lot of it's just super simple. Compared to what we normally do, like when you look at the complexity of the bikes and like the design what goes into it, and the face shield was designed and we just went and scaled. So like we felt pretty comfortable in that environment. And I remember an early conversation with Justin. I was like, Justin, if we can figure out how to build a nitro coffee bike for Starbucks with a refrigeration and wood paneling and all these requirements, like, surely we can figure out how to get plastic foam and elastic and staple it together and create, a face shield. And I mean, that was sort of the mantra like we lived by, like, we could figure out how to do this and we can do it and we can do it fast. And it's been quite refreshing actually, just working like one product, like on sort of a production line and scaling it over and over again. And there's actually been some really interesting lessons and key takeaways from it in terms of like how we're thinking of our company going forward from what we learned in the face shields and what we continue to learn every day in terms of how we staff, how we design, and how we build. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, it's not an innovative design. It was just available. And it's also important to note out that, and I talk about this regularly, there are thousands of businesses across the country that are doing this, and in Montana as well, who I think just sort of speaks to, American manufacturing ingenuity and the fact that, like, companies here, we could build product in America and sell in America. And I think that's a lesson that hopefully some of the government and private companies are seeing as well. So, yeah, it's kind of a quick early on learning lesson, but I feel like we did it and did it fast and have figured it out pretty quickly, which was difficult at the beginning, but we're in a really good spot on it now.
Yeah, when you talked a little bit about sort of the breaking down maybe of the staff programmatic silos that may have existed when everybody came together around sort of modifying your fundraiser for an online event. It sounded very much like it was an all hands on deck. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of the process of innovation and just rising to the challenges of COVID have done to staff morale and your team and everybody's approach to working together?
Yeah, actually, so just a couple things, as Kyle said, just really listening to the community is one thing I think that we sort of are used to doing as a nonprofit, is listening to the community and shifting and changing based on what we hear from the community. And also just sort of this attitude of like, if we can figure it out, as Ben was saying, I could relate to both of those things as running a nonprofit. Like we're used to adapting to community needs, and we're used to sort of being scrappy and sort of figuring out like, okay, what are we, the need just changed. So how are we going to shift to do this? And I think at first it was really scary. Like we have, particularly for some staff, okay, my entire job is running sound for events. And this used to be a job that someone had to do, 5-6 nights a week. Well, we really want to keep all of our staff employed. So what are we going to have this person person do now? So it was, a lot of it was for me just creatively kind of trying to shift things. And I will say that, you know, at first, as I'm kind of going back in time now, thinking of the phases, there was the total shutdown phase where we did manage to keep everyone still working on half time, and we moved entirely to Zoom. And part of how we kind of got through that was I would give everyone little challenges like this. Today you have to show up in a homemade mask on the Zoom call. Or today, you know, you have to come up, like, everybody, like, come in with your best joke, or like give me design a fun background, you know, in your home, just to kind of keep people from, because I think there was also this just like, are we keeping people from walking off the ledge at that point? And there was just so much fear about, am I going to have a job? Are we going to go on? And so that that was how we kind of got through those times, is just trying to think of really strange and funny things to do on Zoom to kind of keep things upbeat as we were giving people tasks. And then, you know, I have to say that PPP loan, getting that loan really helped us. Even though it was only for 6 weeks, it kind of helped us with a mental shift of like going, okay, everybody's back to full time, and we're going to use this opportunity as sort of having a little bit of help to stay operating, to really, everyone got extra points for teaching themselves a new skill that would be handy in the future. So I taught myself, you know, I taught myself iMovie. So I just started making movies. We did several projects in the community, and I just started making movies about them to get them out. We started developing like our YouTube channel and making instructional videos for home, and just like really trying every possible thing that we could do to just stay creative and innovative, and thinking about worst case scenario, if it's going to be a long time before we're back to normal, how are we going to handle this? So we just came up with, you know, we had to cancel our art openings, in-person art openings. So we shifted openings to online. We did something called pandemic postcards, where we sent out 150 postcards to just kind of a random list of people in Missoula that had some people talk bubbles on them. And we had everyone sort of add their own art to it or fill in the talk bubbles and send them back to us. And it became this really amazing kind of project that's going to go, I mean, it'll be historical. I mean, it was just all about the Zoom and the things people are dealing with, and the pain and the hysteria. And so really we were just, okay, we can support our mail system at the same time as supporting artists, at the same time as getting people in, because we had to shut down our, you know, event center where we were having artists come in and play music every night, and we were paying them. Instead, we decided to do a relief fund. So, you know, I contacted Susan and some other funders and decided to do an artist relief fund. And I put the staff who would generally be organizing shows in our showroom on organizing the relief fund to be giving to artists. So that became a big thing, that we got some funding for that, and we're drawing names every Friday, and then we do this big social media burst around these artists and giving them exposure, and then also sending them a check. And so really just trying to go, okay, the world has shifted, the needs are different, but we really want to keep our staff employed full time. And so what can we have them do? We changed our Paint Your Own Pottery studio to an online order and curbside pickup. So we had our customer service person, you know, constructing take-home art kits instead. And so all of those things, you know, it's been challenging as we as staff and board go through our, I think emotions are, and the unknown has been a challenge, but I think as we've kind of just met every step of the way and tried to think in each moment, okay, what are we going to do to meet the needs of the community and also keep everyone, our whole crew, engaged. So we've had, now we're in our 9th. Next week will be our 10th week of summer camps. We've managed to stay open all summer, except 1 week we shut down because we did have a positive case, COVID case among one of our volunteers, which I can talk about that more later. But we've had, our event people who used to run events in the showroom are teaching summer camps now. They're teaching kids and they're recording the kids' rock camps, and everyone's kind of, we've just sort of had to shift and refocus everyone. But I think that we've all, what the positive thing is, we've learned things about ourselves. Like I learned that I love making iMovies. Our event technician learned that he loves teaching kids how to play music. Our community outreach coordinator taught a comic book camp and loved it, and now wants to teach 5 more camps, and it's like, well, if that's what we need to do, then that's what we'll do.
Great. Thanks, Kia.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's no greater champion for how attuned our nonprofits are to our community needs than Susan, and I'm going to turn it over to her here in a second, but just briefly want to share that I guess in the spirit of what I hear so much from Susan about the sort of contribution that our nonprofits make and our businesses make to the community, I don't think I've ever seen a moment quite like COVID to sort of blur the boundaries between the for-profit and nonprofit communities. I was so inspired working with Rocky Mountain Biologicals, a local biotech company, in the early days of COVID, and our hospitals were running out of viral test media to transport test results or test samples. And we were working with one of these companies to develop a test media product locally to get to our hospitals so they could continue testing. And at one point we were all kind of negotiating back and forth, and the hospitals were wondering, well, we won a lot of this, but how much will it cost? And to their credit, the company basically said, we'll figure out the cost later. We want to get you what you need right now because this work is super important. And I think one of the things that's been so rewarding doing my work has just been seeing everybody set aside everything except what matters most. And that's a really powerful thing for us as a community and maybe as humanity right now to be faced with thinking really clearly about what matters most. And what matters most right now is me keeping us on time. So I'm going to turn things over to Susan Hay-Patrick.
Thank you all. This was really great. I think this was a bit of a silver lining. Learning from you how you brought your creativity, brains, and leadership to transform and sustain your organizations in this unprecedented time. And Kia, I think you should share your thought bubble postcards with Kyle for the history project. So
yes,
that's a cool thing. So one of the hallmarks of City Club is Q&A, and it's a very rich part of every City Club discussion. So please use the Q&A, not the chat, but the Q&A format to type in your questions. And then Grant, 2 of our board members will forward them to Grant to pose to our panel. Sometimes we don't get to all of those questions, but just a reminder that we're looking for questions, not necessarily statements, but succinct questions. And if you're here representing the media, please wait till the end of the forum. We're happy to connect you with our panelists afterwards. So with that, I hope people do have questions of these very creative thought leaders and doers in our community. Or do you absolutely know everything you've ever needed about innovation in the time of COVID? Well, while we're waiting for a question, I guess I would say that one of the things that we as a community are struggling with now, and Grant is very much involved in this, is the uncertainty around the reopening of school. And we don't have a system. We know that we have a fragile and scrappy, but very fragile early child care system. We are now turning our attention to how can we develop, if necessary, a system of childcare for school-age kids, if school as we know it doesn't look like school as we know it. And I welcome the creative thinking and resources of everybody on this call, not just the panelists, but all of you in the community, please know that we are turning our attention to that subject. And it's going to take the kind of creativity and willingness to pivot and do things differently that I think has characterized everything that you three have shared with us today. And Kyle, quick question from me. How do we get the results of the oral history project?
Oh, great question. You can they're not officially up yet and available, but they will be probably within the next month or so. At the Mansfield Library on campus, there's the K-Ross Tool Archives, which is headed by Donna McCrae, who's the university archivist, wonderful archivist. And I'll be working with her to have all of the interviews that the interns did kind of uploaded and available there. All of the interviews have been transcribed so you can read them, but I think all of them were done via Zoom, maybe one wasn't. So they're also recorded and videoed so you can see the process. Each one is about 45 minutes to an hour long, and each will have their own webpage that gives you a description of who did the interviewing, who the interviewee was, and what the general content was, so you can get an overview before diving into the full interview.
Great. Grant, I see we have questions, so I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah. So our first question is from, and I'll apologize if I don't get name pronunciations right, but I believe it's Eliza Cray. And for all of you, what are you doing to help minority groups in Missoula? Maybe Kia, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, actually, one of the things we're doing right now, which has been a nice thing to be able to do, that we know we can do this art with social distancing, is we have a mural project in our alley. We did a call to artists, and it's about the call was for individual artists to paint murals in the theme of feeling welcome, and the artists are tasked to talk to the community, communities of refugees, communities of in the indigenous and BIPOC communities, and design these murals around these conversations with some disenfranchised groups in Missoula who don't always get to be part of the public planning process and getting their voices heard. And these murals will be painted downtown, and all of the artists selected are from those communities, and they're in the process of these conversations, and they're going to be painting these murals. And that's a project that we were really excited that we were able to go forward and do and not postpone due to COVID, because it is a social distanced outdoor project, and all the conversations have been able to be had on Zoom and whatnot. We also have one of the other things we did in response to the pandemic is we changed our galleries. We added a new gallery. It's called the Zach's Big Giant Front Windows Art Gallery. And that gallery is a rotating gallery space. It's just our front windows, so people walking by can see. And we've done several calls, and there's been a Black Lives Matters call, and there's been some really amazing artwork that's come in, and it's being showcased in that window for that. Let's see. We're always trying. Those are two off the top of my head, big things that we've been doing lately. And I may think of some more, but I'll pass it on to somebody else for a moment.
Kyle?
Yeah, sure. I really appreciate the question, Eliza, because it gives me the opportunity to tell you all about other things we've been doing. It's actually been a really creative time at the university, which is not surprising because it's often, if not always, a creative time at the university, but there's something right now that's really pushing the creativity meter. One thing we did, a colleague in philosophy and I did in the past month and a half with conversation from some faculty in other disciplines, was we created a new micro credential at UM. And this is a kind of series of courses and an internship that students can take if they're interested in achieving this kind of micro credential. which indicates that they have some kind of knowledge and expertise in a particular area. And the micro-credential that we created and has been submitted for approval is a micro-credential in racial justice studies. So if students are interested in issues of racial justice, they can select from a group of courses, take 3 of them. They're history, African American studies, Native American studies, sociology, so on and so on. And they can earn that by taking the series of courses and then doing some kind of internship that gives them the opportunity for outreach in the community or with particular communities in and around Missoula. So this is something I'm excited about. I know my colleagues are excited about, and I think it speaks directly to what you were asking about.
Thanks, Kyle. Ben?
Yeah, thanks. We're actually a great question, and it's been, you know, as Kyle alluded to, a really interesting time, and we're actually sort of addressing sort of the needs of the minority community and jobs in 2 different ways. So one is some in bike and some in PPE. So on our bike side, we're actually working with a professional bicycle association, mechanic association, and putting together a scholarship program for people in part of the BIPOC community that will go to UBI, University, I'm missing the name, the Bicycle Institute in Oregon, who they'll get an opportunity to take a class, either bike mechanic or bike welding, which Coaster will pay and sponsor, and then offer them a position on our facility afterwards if they so elect to come and take a job afterwards. And we also collaborated with Imagination Brewing and did a beer with them called Fighting Chance, which was a lot of fun and a great beer. And they're getting ready to brew a second batch of it. And part of that initiative was for every 4-pack of beer, we're donating face shields to a different organization, 5 different organizations. Some of those were refugee focused, as well as the Montana Racial Equity Project, and a number of different, groups within the area. And it went really, really well, and people were super appreciative, and we're excited to do that again when they brew the next batch of beer to continue to send out face shields to those different groups and organizations.
Thanks, Ben. I'll take that all part very literally and just share really briefly that at MEP, I participated in a diversity, equity, and inclusivity training about a week or so ago. And I'm personally trying to go through our policies as an organization to really understand and assess how those shape our organization and impact our ability to help and support minority populations in our community. At a bigger scale, we're working on a project right now that's focused on how we work in our opportunity zone, which is a geographic region in Missoula that's a low-income census housing tract that has a much larger than average proportion of minority population in Missoula. And we're looking at ways to empower the community to have a voice over how dollars are invested in and what kind of redevelopment, community development, and economic development takes place in that community, and ensure that the people in the community are empowered to shape that outcome. Those are a few ways that we're trying to be a better organization and bring front and center to our minds what we can do to serve minority populations. I'm going to move on to the next question. This is from Debbie Johnston. I'm interested in asking if Ben at Coaster Cycles is going to continue to make face shields, or if they plan to go back to their more traditional product lines following the pandemic.
Yeah, so we are building bikes. We're working on a big project for Amazon right now that happened in all this, which has been great and really nice. But we have carved out sort of a medical side of our business now. We actually, we think we're going to continue doing it. It's the plan to continue doing it. We actually had the Lieutenant Governor out a couple weeks ago to our facility and went back to the governor's office. And they just placed an order for youth face shields for the schools within Montana. We're working with the Department of Military Affairs to procure those. And so I think it's something that will kind of go ongoing. We're working on a number of different federal and state opportunities, and have done some stuff and some other items as well, mostly around school districts and helping schools and kids get back to school safely. So whether it's gowns or whether it's thermometers, it's a fairly small world in the PPE world. So, I think think we're going to continue to do it. It's one of those things that, as you've learned it, it's kind of easy to throttle up and throttle down based on what demand looks like. And that's kind of how we're doing it right now and how we anticipate that happening sort of as our, customers sort of demand and as like kind of what happens with the pandemic. So I think it will be around for a while.
Thanks, Ben. The next question is near and dear to my heart and to my organization's sort of highest priority right now. And maybe I'll just provide a little context for this question. As an economic development organization, we realize, and this is not unrelated to maybe the first question we had, many of our workers don't have the luxury of working from home. About 25% of our workforce has children that are in the home and of school age. And so the challenge this presents for people to get back to work and the challenge this presents for children to be able to learn and be in healthy, productive learning environments, and the challenge created for not just our short-term economic recovery, but really to ensure that we're a strong nation economically a generation from now, really depends on our ability to get our kids into healthy learning environments this fall. Our question specifically comes from Gail Carlson. What, if anything, are the speakers doing to adapt for employees with children returning to school on a limited basis? If you are adapting schedules, are you giving this option to all employees? Kyle, Kia, do you want to start?
Sure. I'll just say that, yes, actually from the very beginning, it's always been utmost priority of mine that the staff here feel safe. And so it's always been an option to work from home throughout this entire process, and it will continue to be. And I encourage people who can work from home rather than coming in to do that and keep themselves safe and give themselves opportunity for mental health. I think one of the things that's been having to constantly address in this time too is that we're just in a new realm that we've never been in before, and it can be scary, and there's different levels of comfort, and we hear the news, and so anyhow, everyone here can work from home if they want to, and we just have different ways of making sure that work gets done. And if their particular job depends on being in the ZAC and they are feeling like they aren't able to be here, we just trade out positions or make it happen some other way. So safety and people's ability to get their needs met with their families is of utmost priority to us. Then again, I only have 7 employees, so it would be much harder to have that policy with 150 employees if they all decided to stay home. So
thanks, Kia. Kyle?
For faculty, there's quite a bit of flexibility that's built into the university system in terms of teaching classes and whatnot. So it's there already. For staff, I think there's a different story there. And I at present don't supervise any staff, so I can't speak to how their situation with families and whatnot is being treated. But I know over the past several months, people have been working from home and zooming into meetings and doing their work remotely. I would say I think I said at the outset, something like 95% of our courses are taught face-to-face, and that's the kind of norm for my department. I would say moving into the fall, we're probably about 45 to 50% face-to-face, which is to say we have more online options, we have more remote options, we have more hybrid options. There's a whole nomenclature around this that's developed. And it's a little confusing at times, but it won't be confusing for students. But I think these things also give instructors and students with families and childcare responsibility a little bit more flexibility and hopefully enough to help them be successful students and to teach their classes well.
Thanks, Kyle. Ben?
Yeah, I think my answer would mimic a lot like Kia's. As a CEO of the company, like it's something I personally struggle with 3 young kids at home and working from home and my wife working from home. So I certainly can empathize and understand the challenges that we face, especially now with kids at least for us, kids not going back to school. and how we are going to adapt and learn in that environment. So, much of the way, what I'm experiencing at home, we want to be able to mimic with the people working with us as well. And they have to be, they have to have a flexible schedule that'll enable them to be at the shop and be at home. We certainly encourage that and understand that, just having done it personally. And, I don't know. I think it's going to be a really challenging fall for a lot of people. And I think just, being open and being understanding and recognizing that there's no benchmark in how you do this is I think going to be really important for everyone. And, I think we've tried to embody that as much as possible with all the folks that are working with us and make sure, that their children and their family are safe and feel protected first before they come into work. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Our next question comes from Russ Fletcher. Will telecommuting and remote learning become more of the norm in the future? Do you expect to see those changes stick after COVID?
I'm laughing because historians should never predict the future. It's just it's not what we do. But I'll do it anyway. I would say I don't know if more of the norm, but I think our eyes have been open to some other possibilities through this process. But there's no one on my faculty or in my student body, for the most part, who wants to go and take nothing but remote or online courses or teach them. That's just not what people want to do. Students have made it pretty clear, and there was a survey done by the administration back in April, kind of towards the end of the semester. Students want to be back in the classroom as soon as possible. That said, I think there's going to be an increase in remote teaching and online teaching moving forward. But I think that'll help the university access different types of students. So it probably won't be a bad thing.
I think.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kia.
I think we'll all use this as an opportunity to just say too that we have been able to have again successful summer camps. We made a huge amount of changes. We had we reduced enrollment. All the kids have been wearing masks 100% of the time. They've been coming in, getting their temperature checked. We have a bazillion hand washing times throughout the day and hand sanitizer and things in place. And all of that has been extremely difficult on us and the staff. It's been a lot of work. It's been very hardly economically sound idea, but it's been wonderful. And because we have really seen that the kids there's just such that need to come together and be together in person. And when they're here, you can feel that they're getting something that they need. So I think we'll always prefer to do things in person. So I think if we would never intentionally go, oh, this is better, online thing, but there have been some pluses to doing it, knowing that we can do online, and because we can reach audiences outside of Missoula. We can reach more rural places in Montana, which is also a dream of ours, to be able to connect with more people through our educational programs. And so elements of that, I think, will continue, and knowing that we can be creative. And I don't know, Susan can probably relate to this, but when you run a nonprofit, you've got a bazillion different committees and things, and they're all volunteers. And it's hard for people to show up. And I just noticed that you can get more people to show up when it's on Zoom. I'm going to continue to use, I don't think we've implemented this enough we could have 5 board members in a room and 5 on Zoom if they can't make it to the actual location that day. But I think learning this tool has definitely opened some doors that we will continue to keep open in the future.
Thanks, Kia. Ben?
Yeah, similar answers. I think, it's going to be very organization specific. We're on that. Obviously, all the big tech companies are saying they're going to be work from home through 2021, right? Maybe permanently. But certainly, for what we do, some of that work is hard. Obviously, you can't build a bike or a face shield from home. And so And a lot of what we do is quite collaborative as well. I mean, when you're working with engineers and designing and things like that, and you're running out to the shop and you're prototyping, I mean, that is difficult to do over the computer. It can be done, but difficult. So I think, going into the future, obviously the pandemic will guide how this sort of goes, but it's still going to be sort of a hybrid approach for us of, some telecommute and some in person. Though ultimately I think Kia and Kyle would like to be fully back together as a team and a group in person and collaborating together in the future.
Great, thanks. Our next question is from Craig Stahlberg. It's specifically for Kyle. Kyle, could you comment or maybe share your thoughts about what you think is sort of the impact on a student in a remote learning environment, and what additional effort is needed for them to get the same amount of knowledge or learning out of a class that's online versus in person? And maybe after sharing that, you could share your thoughts about any advice you've had for incoming freshmen who may be facing an online learning environment.
This is Craig's question. This is Craig, right?
Yeah.
Craig, great question. It's tough to say kind of writ large across the university, but I would say even without remote learning, the University of Montana, like lots of institutions of higher learning, it's the kind of place where you can get out of it what you put into it. And I encourage all students when they show up, when I meet with them early in their academic careers, to be hungry, to be passionate, to thirst for knowledge, to develop a kind of lifelong love of learning. And these aren't just things we say, these are things that I really mean. I think that advice should be even stronger in the online learning environment. I'm thinking back to the course I taught this past summer in May and June, which is an online course. I taught History 101 online to 60 students, and it's a 6-week course. And I think if you want to succeed in that course and you want to get everything out of it that you deserve, that takes full effort. That means full preparation. That means in online discussion forums. That means full engagement. I wasn't surprised that about 20 students dropped out of my course after the second week. And that's because I think the course is demanding and it's not for everyone. And I think that's okay. I don't think that's a problem. So I ended with 35 students instead of 55 students. And the ones that I had who were able to stick it out, they did great work, but they were all hungry for the knowledge. They, almost to a student, were fully engaged in the online discussion forums. And I was really, really impressed with the work of the class. So yeah, I do think there is kind of an added level of attention and engagement that's needed. But I think if you do it, you can get quite a bit out of the online teaching. Grant, I would say the same thing to freshmen even more strongly. I mean, get ready, get excited about your education, and don't just leave kind of education to the classroom or the kind of online discussion forums or whatever you have in your particular class. And one thing I'll be doing is meeting with students one-on-one via Zoom in office hours. And I encourage students to do that with me throughout the semester. And I suspect, after this pandemic hopefully lifts, I'll continue to have that, where I meet with students using Zoom throughout the week. And for a lot of students, that'll help them because they won't have to come to campus that day. I have a lot of students who come in just to meet with professors, but now we can use technology to alleviate that need, and we can have conversations and kind of maintain that level of intimacy even at a distance. So yeah, freshmen, get to know your professors and take advantage of any opportunities they offer you to meet them face to face, even if it's over Zoom.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Our next question is from Peggy Kuhr. Since the future arc of COVID is still so uncertain, how do your organizations deal on a longer term basis with both the uncertainty and with keeping that innovative spirit alive? Ben, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I think That's been a challenge, right? Because it's so, like I talked very early on, like trying to think in like 4-week increments, and like as we think about what does end of this year look like, what does 2021 look like, you know, one of the key learning lessons for us as a company has been to really get laser focused on a few projects and not a bunch of projects, and try to do those really, really, really well with the more limited resources that we have now. And I think that, you know, there's talks about vaccine, there's talks about when this will end, we'll get back to normal, but we don't have any real answers of what that looks like, and nor do our customers. And there's some trepidation and some current concern on their part as well. So, you know, we're just trying to keep a very positive attitude, you know, with the people working with us and with our customers and with our suppliers, and really just looking for opportunities that mix and match with what the sort of market's presenting to us. So, in that case, it's delivery and logistics. That's really popular right now. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of people buying stuff online, and that's where we're really putting a lot of our energy and effort right now. And we've had some early success in that. And we're going to kind of stay on that path, at least for the imminent future, and see where that takes us, you know, and ultimately, once this does all end or get back to normal, there will be certain parts of our business that we recognize and acknowledge we won't go back to. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And so it's been a good learning lesson for us, and it'll be interesting to see how these next few months and couple of years really pan out.
Thanks, Ben. Kia?
Yeah, I would say, you know, we're constantly trying new things. We're launching just this month the social distance sessions, which we're bringing bands back into and also comedy shows and whatnot back into our event space. And we're going to be in partnership with MCAT, live broadcasting shows over the internet and doing things like that. So we're hoping that will bring back a little bit more of an element of live performance. But I think generally speaking, surveying the community. We've surveyed the community a lot. We actually just sent out a recent survey to parents asking about, you know, is there a place where the ZAC can fill in the gaps if school is only half time? If kids are home more days, can we fill in the gaps rather than just having after school camps? Can we do during the day camps? And I think it's just constantly asking and constantly having the conversation, being extremely transparent about where we're at, communicating everything as clearly as possible about what we're thinking and what we're looking at, and also taking questions and receiving feedback is how we're going to go on, and how we're going to keep shifting to meet the needs and as they keep shifting. So,
Kyle.
Yeah, just to circle back to something I said earlier about the nature of the university, to Peggy's question. I mean, if the university and faculty members and students aren't innovating, they're not being a university. So the innovative spirit has to continue. I would say, as we think about that, though, we should consider innovations both small and large. That sometimes innovations come in really micro ways that are super important. Other times they come, for me, in the form of new programs or opportunities. And I think both are really important to consider. And the last thing I think about is we can't forget, when we're emphasizing innovation, what we've done well for a very long time. In other words, I think Ben and Kia might agree, we all have our roots in what we've done well and what's brought us success so far. So I think there's pressure to innovate, and I think that's great, but I think there's also a certain kind of continuity of our work, which has to also remain at the forefront of what we do.
Great. We just have a couple of minutes left, and it turns out that Bonnie Buckingham has a question that is very close to the one that I hope to wrap up with. So Bonnie, if you don't mind, I'm going to integrate yours and mine together, and that is to say, of the things that you've adapted, changed, or innovated, either programmatically or otherwise, what's one of those things that you hope you never sort of lose when we get through COVID and we're on the other side, that you really take with you moving forward? Kyle, would you be willing to start us out?
I'm gonna take a pass.
Okay.
But come back to me.
I will. Ben?
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, I've talked about this a couple times, and I think our key takeaway from COVID right now is that, like, face shields has taught us really simple, highly productive, and ability to scale. And so, as I mentioned very, very openly, like, we're doing a lot of things, but nothing great. So, like, you know, the way we think about the future now, again, is going to be, you know, focused on fewer products, with larger scale opportunity, and likely with fewer clients with whom we're working with. And so, that's been a really, I think, interesting learning lesson that frankly, without the face shields, we wouldn't have gotten to that point. And so that taught us something about ourselves and the way we work and the way we think we can grow and scale as a company, to be focused on, you know, doing a few things, doing them really, really well, and doing those in scale. So, and that's being implemented now in the work we're doing today. And so it's exciting to see, like, as an organization and the people whom I work with, to go and embody that same sort of philosophy. And we're really excited to see what kind of comes out of that in the future.
That's great. So Kia and Kyle, you each have 30 seconds here. What do you think?
I would say a strong sense of connection and unity among our staff and among our core people. I do think when you go through something like this, I think we've sort of reinvigorated sort of a sense of purpose and how we can work together, and how we can sort of focus together and be unified.
Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, kind of echoing Ben and what I said, you know, just before. I mean, really thinking about what opportunities are there that are new and exciting, like what I was doing and trying to get students out to engage with the public in a public history project. That's great, but also not forgetting, you know, what got us here, which is teaching core skills like writing, research, critical thinking, good communication, these sorts of things, kind of bringing those together in a constellation of kind of opportunities for students and for faculty.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure to visit with all of you. I appreciate that you are here in our community, and I think I'll turn things over now to Susan to wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was, I think we achieved the purpose of finding a few bright spots. So thank you all for being smart, inspiring, creative, caring leaders, both our moderator and all our panelists, our audience, and for the great questions. Alex, as always, our Wizard of Oz behind the scenes, and the University of Montana for their super duper web forum format. And again, thank you to our sponsors, our executive level sponsors, the University of Montana Blackfoot and First Security Bank, and to all of our other sponsors. Please join them. Please join us on September 14 for a forum on Montana I-190, the marijuana legalization and tax initiative. That ought to be thought-provoking and get some great questions there. So look forward to seeing you then. And meanwhile, stay safe, and thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.